It's August 2020, 6 months after the start of the pandemic. We know much more today than we did back in March and February. Back in March and February, we were relying on predictions and models. Today, we have data and evidence. But it seems we have lost sight of what the objective is, what the goal is, and how severe and how dangerous COVID is. It's become a very complicated circumstance, and we're making it more complicated than it needs to be. A good measure of a disease or an illness is its impact. How does it impact people? And we know that we measure that by fatalities and by hospitalization rates. That's how we measure a disease. It's how we always have measured the severity of a disease. That's how we were measuring COVID. That's how we have always have measured diseases. That's always how we understood the severity of a disease. How many people died from it? How many people were hospitalized? That's what we were doing in February, March, and April. But things have changed. Now we see there are very few hospitalizations. In Ontario, it's less than 60 people in a province of 14.5 million. But where the emphasis is now is how many positive cases and how much testing is being done. In Ontario, we're testing approximately 30,000 people every day for COVID. And for the last number of weeks, less than 100, or about 100 per day, are testing positive. But here's something else. Most people don't and aren't aware that they have COVID. Most people who contract COVID experience no symptoms or very mild symptoms. And we know that's true. But for some reason, around the world and in our province, we are saying, forget all what we know about severity, and let's rely only on how many cases are being tested. If we're going to measure the severity of COVID and keep our economy locked down, keep our education system locked down, keep our healthcare system locked down, because of the amount of people that we test, or because of the amount of people who aren't ill, this is a level of contradiction, but it's also absurd. Absurd that we would place all the importance on cases rather than severity, rather than hospitalizations. We have to untie this Gordian knot that we have tied ourselves up into over COVID. We have to begin to look at this in a rational, thoughtful manner without being driven by fear and by predictions and models. We need to look at the reality of what is happening. If you think our government's position and these restrictions are unreasonable, that they're disproportionate to the risk, we all have a duty to speak up to make our phone calls to the Premier, to your local politicians, to your members of Parliament, and tell them that we are not going to keep locked down because of people who are tested positive but have no symptoms or few symptoms. Let's get back to measuring disease and illness and severity in a rational way. How many people are hospitalized? How many people die? And let's go back to what we originally stated back in February, March. The purpose of these restrictions were so that our hospitals would not be overwhelmed. Well, we know in Ontario, our hospitals are not overwhelmed. When we have 50 people hospitalized in all our hospitals, we know that they're not overwhelmed. There was even the case where many and most of these temporary hospitals that were created for COVID have yet to see a COVID patient. Please, if you believe that these are unreasonable policies, disproportionate to the level of risk, pick up the phone. Let's make some changes. Let's untie this complicated Gordian knot that we've knotted ourselves up with, and let's get back to normal.